Good evening. Welcome to Game of Thrones Predictions. I'm James Johnson. In this particular video, it's intended for people who have read the Song of Ice and Fire book series up to book 5, because we're going to be talking about spoilers. I'm also going to be referencing a novella written by George R. R. Martin called A Song for Leah, and I'm pretty much going to be spoiling the end. So if you haven't read it, you might want to go out and get it. It's $2.50 on Amazon Kindle. I think it's like around $10, give or take, for a soft cover. Okay, so if you have not read those books, don't watch this video. Or if you have read those books and don't want predictions, don't watch this video. This could be a long one, not compared to the video reviews we do, but okay. So first of all, let me talk about A Song for Leah. I've talked about it in other videos, but I'm not sure I've gone so far as to spoil exactly what happens in it. So Martin wrote this in, I think, 1974, and he won a bunch of awards for it, a Nebula Award, a Hugo Award, but I think it directly plays into what's going on in the books we're reading, A Song of Ice and Fire, which is why I would like to discuss it. So, A Song for Leah is about two characters named Rob and Lyanna. And they're both in love. It's a futuristic science fiction setting, and Rob has the ability to read emotions. So if he's talking to somebody, he can read their emotions and the emotions that they're hiding underneath those emotions. But he can't read their thoughts. Leah is capable of reading thoughts. And the book is written from the perspective of Rob. So we get this interesting concept of watching Rob and Leah investigate this planet. And during the investigation, we take Rob's perspective, which means we're watching Rob reading people's emotions as conversations happen, and then later it's his conversations with Lyanna where we realize what the person they were speaking to was actually thinking. And it's set on a planet, not Earth, but there are humans who have expanded their realm into the outer reaches of space, and they've found this one planet with citizens called the Kree, and the Kree are, every single one of them, believers. It says in the first couple of pages, it's the one planet without a heretic, but they're believers in this strange religion that is not quite understood, and the head of the human city is trying to figure out why humans are switching to this religion. And the reason it's an issue is because when you are a member of this religion, there are steps you take. The first step is you attach something called a Greeshka. A Greeshka, Greeshka, and it is basically a symbiotic organism that Lyanna says does not even have, and I can't remember what she calls it, but it's basically the spark that says it has consciousness. It doesn't even have that. It's without consciousness, and it's a parasitic organism that is attached to your body, and it grows onto you. It actually becomes a part of you, and you of it. So you're walking around. That's the first step, and the second step is you go out and tell the world. Once the Greeshka has been attached for long enough, you go out into a specific event where you tell the world all of your secrets, every emotion, every feeling you've ever had. And there's a pivotal scene where someone says that they are the most traumatic moment of their life was them accidentally being the cause of their brother's death, and he never got to be joined. Okay, so the culmination of the story is that we find out, and humans are joining it now, and the Kree are not humanoid. They're kind of humanoid, but they have they're completely different. The crux of the end of the story is that the final stage is to walk into this huge mountain where there's a pulsing giant Greeshka, and again, no consciousness. And once you've been joined, you've gotten the tiny little Greeshka on you. You walk around town ringing bells, and people bring you food for free. And Liana basically says that they are. It's almost like a meditative state, but it's a shared consciousness meditative state almost. Well, ultimately, what they're doing is they're joining the Greeshka by letting the Greeshka attached to them join the main Greeshka. And Liana, ultimately, we find out that this Greeshka is an amalgam of all the consciousnesses that join it. So if you join it, you share your memories, emotions, and thoughts with every other person that's ever joined it. So it's literally a collective consciousness, and as long as the Greeshka is alive, so are you. You are ultimately happy. You have absolute knowledge, and as far as you're capable of having it within all the consciousnesses that have joined the Greeshka. And at the end, and I'm spoiling it, Liana joins because it is that perfection. It is an afterlife. It is the ultimate afterlife. It's heaven. Rob chooses not to. Partially, he can't really explain why he chooses not to, but he basically justifies it by saying that there's got to be something else. I don't know, but there's got to be something even greater than this afterlife. There's got to be an even better afterlife. Okay. So there's this collective consciousness wherein people voluntarily join it, and through joining it have an afterlife where they have this shared consciousness. And by afterlife, I mean they continue to live. For as long as the Greeshka exists, they continue to live. And remember, Martin wrote this before he ever wrote Game of Thrones, 10 years before he wrote Game of Thrones. Martin also wrote for Star Trek Next Generation. He was a writer during the time, I believe, that the Borg were introduced for Star Trek Next Generation. And the Borg are similarly a collective consciousness, although they maintain their own consciousness, just like the people who joined the Greeshka do in A Song for Leah. But the Borg, if you're not familiar with Star Trek Next Generation, the Borg are an intergalactic species that they, like a virus, go out to planets or ships and take the members of that ship or planet and turn them the show chose to do it with electric futuristic mechanical looking stuff. There's eyes with red dots, and they've got wires coming out of them and stuff like that, but you've created a collective consciousness. And there's even in one version of Star Trek Voyager, there's a Borg that was able to escape the Borg, and her name is 7 of 9. So the Borg are this collective consciousness that acts as if it were a virus spreading throughout the world. Acts as if it were a virus spreading throughout the universe. There's a Star Trek movie where there is a Borg queen who is just like, if all the Borg are one collective consciousness, she's the head tier. And the movie is kind of, a lot of people don't like it, and I'm cool with that. It didn't do anything for me. It's not bad. It's not horrible. It's just not as awesome as Star Trek movies arguably could be. Like the old ones. But the movie makes it vague as to whether the Queen is the head of this Borg collective, and they call themselves the Collective, and they're saying, almost their motto is "resistance is futile," and that just sounds like something Martin would write. Resistance is futile. I don't know that Martin wrote that. I don't know that, but and they call themselves the Collective. Okay, so let me make sure I covered everything I was trying to right there. Okay, Martin, I think, likely had a huge influence on the understanding of the Borg, but so the female queen, it's really not revealed whether she is a result of the collective consciousness or whether she is the head of the collective consciousness. She seems to be the head, but if she were the amalgam, then obviously she'd be the head. She'd be the one who seemed to control it, where she was actually just like, okay, now I'm going to get deep. I feel as if I'm one being. If you cut off my finger, though, is my finger me? If it dies, is it still me? If you cut off a part of my brain and remove it, I'm still me, the self, the ego, but a part of me's been removed. The point I'm getting at here is that on an individual basis, every single one of us, every single person watching this has a sense of self. They define themselves. I can close my eyes and reach around and know generally where things are. I see things and automatically interpret it, and I attach those to feelings and emotions and thoughts I've had previously. I mean, in a way, we even view our community as a self, and on and on. Okay, so Martin has intentionally, in my opinion, taken the idea of an afterlife and run that thread through these novels, and almost done it without us knowing. I'm going to start with the first one, which I think is not obvious that this is what's going on, especially in the TV show, but in the books, it's the House of the Undying. Dani is basically offered the opportunity to live forever under a hallucinogenic state where she will see vague semblances of the future. And the TV show went a different route. It doesn't actually say that she would be immortal. And the books don't really either. But it's called the House of the Undying, and they want her there. So she would choose to stay immobile and live forever and have a hallucinogenic state. And she ends up destroying whatever is pulling her to it, which is this blue, amorphous, glowing, heart-looking thing, pulsing, which is very close to the Greeshka, although the Greeshka is red. Then we have the idea of Rolor bringing people back, and we don't know it's Rolor, but something, and I say something, and I'm not personifying it necessarily, but something non-personified, I don't know, is capable of bringing things back after they die. That is a form of afterlife. Arguably, it changes you, and you're not really the same person, or lesser at least, but that's a form of afterlife. We've got Varamir Sixskins, who has the ability to take his consciousness and move it to someone else. I think he's lived 8 lives in the books, might be 9. But he's able to move his consciousness, and he does it at the end of the epilogue to Dance with Dragons. He tries to move it into the girl, and ends up moving it into his wolf One Eye. There's also the Faceless Men. The Faceless Men are kind of the entity where a lot of other people donate their selves to this pool. Pool is in a collective, a series of options for the faceless man, the stranger, the one without a face, the blank canvas to select from. When in the Mercy chapter from The Winds of Winter, released recently, Arya is Mercy, who is a completely different person, and we already know that the Faceless Men become the people who donate their faces, and they basically donated it by killing themselves. Arguably, the faces can be stolen. We don't know for sure yet, but so the people who go to the House of Black and White and kill themselves, drinking the liquid or whatever way, donate their faces, and thus their every memory they have, arguably. Otherwise, how would Arya know what Mercy was? Now, you could argue that Arya had killed Mercy and taken her face, and she had watched Mercy and pretended to be her, but the Faceless Men just seemed to take the faces, put on the persona. I mean, this is an afterlife, and the stranger becomes you whenever it wants and uses you to kill people or pursue whatever their motives are. That's an afterlife. And Arya has hidden herself deep, deep, deep within Mercy so that she is Mercy. She keeps reminding herself, you're Mercy, you're Mercy. It's only her ultimate goal that remains, her ultimate goal absent Mercy, that remains at the bottom. Everything else is Mercy. That's an afterlife. All right. So those are the basic ones before I get to ones that we have not discussed yet in the books. Oh, then there's the Whites, which arguably is an afterlife without consciousness. It's a removal of consciousness. And we're not sure if I think from the perspective of Arya in the Mercy chapter, it's not as if Mercy is still alive. It's just that everything that Mercy was is available to Arya, and she uses that to become Mercy. Arya becomes Mercy. It's not like Mercy's resurrected, although arguably she is. This is a form of deep metaphysical afterlife. Okay. And the Whites. If we remove consciousness and allow the body to continue, that's basically a white. Now, we're not 100% sure, W-I-G-H-T. No, we're not 100% sure what their motivations are or how they work, but it's apparent that they are mobile and that they don't have consciousness. I think that that's undeniable. And I think that all these things are connected, that Martin's ultimate idea is that the separation of body and mind, and if you become a Faceless Man, you have almost stored your memories, and you give up your body. And for the House of the Undying, your body and your consciousness live, but you're not allowed to go anywhere. With Catelyn and Beric Dondarrion, your body is allowed to live on, but and so is your consciousness, but your consciousness has been tainted, almost as if it's been stripped from your body through death and then brought back, but while it was floating out there, it deteriorated, it rotted, festered. The Whites seem to have their consciousness removed, and then the body's resurrected. Arguably, they're being warged, I don't know. So that brings me to my next question for y'all. Why are there dead bodies, bones, in the Werewood throne, the Greenseer throne? Let me propose to you that it's possible that, similar to the Faceless Men, those people are sacrificing themselves to the Werewood, arguably to have their memories, their thoughts at that moment taken onto the Werewood tree, live on in others' memories. So if I were to kill myself at a Greenseer throne near the Werewood tree would absorb my consciousness, not so that my consciousness lived on, but so that you could see what I was, you could see my memories and my thoughts from my perspective, which arguably already happens with the Werewood trees. Well, we know it. Okay. When Bran has his visions at the Werewood tree, on the Greenseer throne, he does not hear the thoughts of the people that are around him. Now, if he's going to be an ultimate Greenseer, to me he should be able to read thoughts, but he can't yet, apparently, if he is going to be able to. I think that if Bran were able to act, or if someone were to kill themselves at the Werewood, they donate themselves to the Werewood. And similarly to the Faceless Men, your consciousness doesn't survive, but your self does. I don't have an explanation, so just buy in. But if you were a Greenseer, maybe your thoughts are stored. So imagine that a Greenseer sacrificed himself, or died, and was able to move his consciousness, like Varamir, instead of moving it to another animal, to move it to the Werewoods, which is the difference between a skin changer and a green seer, arguably. A skin changer can move their mind from being to being. A green seer, arguably, can move their mind into werewoods. Bear with me. And the werewoods are timeless, and thus you get a glimpse of the past and the future. Now, Bran's visions are not... Bran's told. The visions aren't... It's not clear where they're coming from. Imagine that it's possible. I'm veering off because I'm having difficulty describing what I'm trying to describe. But imagine that if you were a regular person and you sacrificed yourself at the werewood tree, you donate yourself to it, similar to the way the Faceless Men do. You're not going to be used like the Faceless Men do. But if someone were sitting on the green seer throne, they could see your thoughts at that moment. At that moment, you don't live on. But a green seer could take his consciousness and put it in the werewood. Now, if that were true, though, you would think that every green seer ever has put his consciousness into the green seer throne and is therefore a person over your shoulder whispering advice or knowledge that they are aware of. But perhaps when a green seer stores his consciousness in a werewood, it stays at that location. He's no longer mobile throughout the werewood. It remains there. So imagine that a green seer 5,000 years ago killed himself at a werewood throne, or killed himself at the, let's say the werewood tree in Winterfell. His consciousness, literally, he would live on, but he would be trapped in that moment. So if a future green seer were able to go back, a living green seer, were able to go back to that very moment where they were died and then their consciousness moved to the werewood tree, the green seer could find them and be able to talk to them, ask for advice. Almost like doing research in books and finally finding that one sentence that gives you the answer you want. If you want to find the green seer, you have to find him. He's not going to find you. My mom and I are going to do a video soon, and she's going to kill me for saying this, but she came up with the idea, and I think she's right, that Ned is a green seer. And because his honor called him to do so many things one after the other, he never got the chance. He had to take care of Winterfell. We'll get into that in the other video. I'm not stealing her thunder. She did that, and we'll talk about it in the next video. That's one of the ones we have planned. Remember, that was her idea, so be sure to attach her if you want to compliment it or negate it. But to me, Bran is Superman. He's in a cave. The irony is he's paraplegic, but Bran is in a cave. His parents are dead. His world has been... He's in a completely different world, and memories are stored there, just like the... oh, man, what's it called? Superman's palace. Starts with an F. The Fortress of Solitude. There's crystals that Superman has from Krypton that he can put into... it's been done different ways in the comic books, but basically he has a semi-demi consciousness of his father stored so that he can talk to his father. Well, if Ned were a green seer and was able to put his consciousness in a werewood, then, and I don't know how that would happen. I don't see where the werewood was at the Sept where he was killed. But if Bran were forced to go there and find him, then he may be able to talk to his dad specifically. Now, that may not be true. So let me backtrack a little bit and give you an alternative. Bran didn't seem to be able to read other people's thoughts when he was looking back in time. Well, what if he is only able to read the thoughts of green seers? So then when Bran finally, ultimately, um, sees Ned at weirwood trees throughout his life, including when he was little, and including when he was forced to go after his sister, and including when he was at King's Landing trying to convince Robert that the Lannisters aren't good, basically. Bran might be able to hear what he's saying. Make sure I'm answering all this. But that may explain why bones are near the weirwoods. Okay. So that's another form of afterlife, possibly, in the weirwood. Certainly the weirwood provides a form of afterlife. We already know that because the people who have died previously near weirwoods, we watch anybody who's ever been near a weirwood, whatever they did near that weirwood is stored for all time. So that is a kind of afterlife, and that's the kind of afterlife I think we actually have. Somebody dies and they're remembered. Or their legacy lives on. Bran is a form of afterlife of his father, because Bran is his father's son, and his father has told him certain things. The man who passes the sentence must swing the sword. That's a form of afterlife. But that's an easy one to get, because that's in every novel ever. The evolution of ideas, the passing down of traditions and new ideas. Okay, so that's my spiel about the weirwoods, and we'll get more into that in the next video. The other form of afterlife I'd like to talk about is the Whitewalkers. In order to join the Greeshka in A Song for Leah, it almost had to be a voluntary thing, and that's something that's played on with Dracula, with vampires too. You have to volunteer. You have to permit the vampire to enter your house. That's some of the vampire mythology differs everywhere, but you have to permit him to enter your house, and that also plays on the weirwood. The wall not allowing the Whitewalkers, the Night's King Whitewalkers, in, or the Whites. Well, it is my opinion, and I think we've already seen it in the TV show, that the Whitewalkers are humans who have voluntarily given themselves up to this. And since no human would give themselves up voluntarily to this disease, only children can voluntarily give themselves up to this disease. Babies. Ones who don't really understand choices. They take what's given to them as long as they feel comfortable. I think it is possible for a human to ask to become a Whitewalker and to be given that gift. Which is why humans have to be killed to become whites, that's why there are more whites than there are Whitewalkers, because no one's going to volunteer themselves as Whitewalkers, so there have to be children that do it. And the whites are a different capability. It's the body coming alive. There's no White Walker disease with the whites, in my opinion. The White Walkers are a disease you have to choose to take that makes you live longer, makes you taller and stronger, and it also makes you part of a collective consciousness, just like the Greeshka in A Song for Leah, just like the Borg. I think that is exactly what Martin is doing. And if that's true, if it's a disease that affects your genes, and he's never going to say that, it's a fantasy, but if that's the idea, it's a disease that affects your genes, which there are. Mitochondria were not originally part of our bodies. There was a certain point at which, in evolutionary tree, mitochondria invaded our body and ended up taking over a role, and our bodies adapted to it, and now we're combined. And mitochondria are passed down from mothers to their children, because the egg contains the nucleus with DNA in it and all of the necessary parts of the cell, the ribosomes, the endoplasmic reticulum, and other stuff like that. Whereas the male sperm only has DNA. So the mitochondria are floating around, and it has its own DNA. So you can track the mother's genetic lineage, mother to mother to mother to mother, in real life using a mitochondrial DNA, whereas the regular DNA, the cell's DNA, are from both parents. But if it was a disease that affected your DNA and you had to voluntarily choose to take it, and you were made part of a collective consciousness, well, that is the ultimate opportunity to have a true democracy. Because if everybody is simultaneously joining their thoughts, they can choose a leader. But at the same time, they can be controlled easily by a single person if that person were a powerful enough skin changer. In the way Bran controls Hodor, if someone were strong enough to control all the Whitewalkers, then they would have this collective consciousness where they would just be able to control them. And that seems unreasonable. I mean, Bran has difficulty controlling two things. He can't even control himself and Hodor at the same time. But I don't think you need to control in a literal sense, in a constant sense. You can control by giving a goal. If they were to, okay, now this is difficult to describe. I'm sorry that it's difficult to describe, but if the White Walkers are a collective consciousness, now put that aside. In a world 10,000 years ago, in Westeros, 10,000 years ago, people like Varamir were their own rulers. If you were a strong enough warg to warg a shadow cat and a polar bear, basically, and 3 wolves, well, Varamir uses that ability in order to build himself a huge mansion, basically, and control a vast amount of area around him. He rapes whoever he wants to rape, and anybody who gets in his way is killed. And he lives like that for a long time. It's the White Walkers that chase him away from that capability. Well, imagine an entire continent of that. Now, arguably, the Starks are trying to prevent that, but the Starks, Martin says all the Stark children are wargs. That doesn't happen. All the Stark children are wargs. And he didn't say all of Ned's kids are wargs. He said all the Stark children are wargs. That's Ned, that's Benjen, that's Lyanna, that's Rod, that's Ned's dad. That's all the Stark children are wargs. But if we go back 10,000 years, we've got an entire continent of wargs. And 1 in 100 people are wargs. And 1 in 100 of them is a green seer. I think that's right. 1 in 100 is a warg. Well, 1 in 100 people are wargs. And a continent full of that, there are some people who are going to usurp power. And there are some people who are going to be able to control, and I'm using warg incorrectly, so control, skin change, control other skin changers. So I'm a skin changer, you're a more powerful skin changer. You can control 3 wolves, a shadow cat. I can control 3 wolves, a shadow cat, and a polar bear. You can control a lot more than that. But instead of having to control all 5 of these things, you just control me. And I control these 5 things. Well, if the Night's King is imagine the Night's King is the absolute most powerful skin changer ever. And he's got 12 of the just under him most powerful skin changers of the world that he's skin changing. And all of them are part of this collective consciousness. Well, then it's just trickled down. It's this pyramid. This collective consciousness is being controlled by a few who have them mentally trapped. And Martin has said, I always wondered why the orcs and goblins and Uruk-hai, the goblins aren't really, but the orcs and Uruk-hai and the trolls fought for Sauron in Lord of the Rings. It's never explained. Well, he's explaining it now. And I've had comments that argue this. It's possible that Martin ends this with genocide, but that is weak sauce. Martin is not going to end this with genocide. It is a cop-out. Let's kill an entire group of people we disagree with. No. The point is not that an entire culture is wrong, an entire species is wrong, or race. The point is that there's somebody in charge that's telling them to do the wrong things. In the end, and I'm not going to get too much into it because this isn't about the Night's King, really. But in my opinion, at the end of this, the Night's King is going to be an empathetic character. Through Bran, we are going to watch this child, a Stark child, be treated like shit because people are scared of how strong he is of a warg. So much so that he's going to be ostracized by his own parents and sent to the wall. And while he's there, he's going to earn his keep and become Lord Commander. And then meet the female other. And we're going to watch Bran watch all this happen. So that we're not going to get the Night's King's story until he appears and, in my opinion, kills his own son, Roose. And I don't have proof of that. I don't know. I do want to add, though, in a previous theory, sidebar, in a previous theory I said that Roose Bolton is immortal. And I do think he is. But I also said that he was pretending to be other people, and that included somebody who was in Princess and the Queen, named Clubfoot. But the new short story, The Rogue Prince, that's out, clarifies that Roose Bolton is at least not that guy, Clubfoot. And I'd also like to add, seriously, go back and watch both, and you can see my previous videos on this, and this is an evolving thing. I don't know what the fuck's going to happen. I'm just thinking out loud. Go back and watch the scene where Carl Clubfoot in the TV show kills Craster. He wargs Rast in that scene. Skin changes Rast in that scene. I don't think there's any question based on the way they're acting. Number two, if you go watch the scene where John kills Carl in season 4, he wargs into that girl that stabs him in the back. Carl Clubfoot is still alive, that mind, and they're changing it from the books. I don't think this is true in the books. Carl Clubfoot is alive, but he's in the mind of that girl. And I bet the show reveals it by having her say, I always liked curly hair, something like that. So go watch those scenes. Watch her eyes right when that sword goes through his neck. The show's changing it, but they're doing that to show us the steps to take. Anyway, we're going to watch Bran, watch the Night's King, and we're going to empathize like crazy with him, but he's going to be a tainted soul who, even though we understand the choices he's making, he wants destruction for the world. He is in the as powerful Green Seer as there's ever been. Arguably, Bran is more powerful, and that's the ultimate challenge that's going to happen. But he is warging other people, skin-changing other skin-changers, who are then skin-changing this collective consciousness that is the others, and that is an afterlife. It is the potential for a true democracy, and also the potential for a true dictatorship. It's possible at the end of this that with the death of the Night's King and his men that the Whitewalkers turn back, but that's not going to happen. Also, in my previous videos, I talked about the Valyrians being a combination of First Men and Whitewalkers, and I'm standing by that. If you have to choose to be a Whitewalker, you have to voluntarily become a Whitewalker, then the men wouldn't have chosen to become a Whitewalker when they were raping the Whitewalker women that they killed during the Long Night. Long Night happens, we tack all the way up, and on the way back, same thing happens that happened in the Riverlands. The scene with Polliver in the TV show and his men raping that innkeeper's girl, or the Mountain in the books, which is a much worse scene, although they're both pretty fucking grim, and not to mention Carl Clubfoot's scene with the rape going on at the Craster's Keep. The children born of Whitewalkers who have altered DNA, and the Whitewalker women, and the first men are the Valyrians, in my opinion, and they too were ostracized above the wall, and that's why they left. The point of this video is the prevalence of Afterlife and collective consciousness in the ideas that Martin is playing on. And the absolute beauty of Martin doing this is he shows, number one, you don't blame the other people, you blame individuals. Number two, there's the child. You've got the whole aspect of you never kill a child. It's not the child's fault. And the irony is that the Night's King, and side note. But the beauty of having the White Walkers be a collective consciousness is that it shows you can't blame them. You don't blame a society. You blame the people manipulating the society. And you teach them with science and education and sex education to create a better society. But it's a complete, I mean, it's obvious, but it's a complete metaphor for us. We work best when we work together, and that is why the others are so scary. They're a threat because they work together. If Westeros worked together from the get-go, if in the first book Westeros was a united group that without question worked together, the others aren't an issue. As long as you've got Dragonglass. But you got Dragonglass, you arm the people, they go off and they kill. It'll be a horrible war, but the others will die. It's the fact that men are not working together, and that the others are, the White Walkers, that permits the White Walkers to have an advantage. Collective consciousness and afterlife. I can't stress those two enough. I sincerely think that's what's going on. And Martin is building up the idea of diseases in these books for the same purpose, so that he can go, I mean, Pale Mare, the Bloody Flux. Let me get a little grayscale in there. We're going to watch a Typhoid Mary situation. We're going to watch a Jon Snow situation, a cholera outbreak situation. We're going to ultimately see a vaccination situation, and then we're going to understand the idea of the White Walkers and in the books, and we kind of already do in the TV show. I think they did that for that purpose, so that they don't have to explain too much later on. Yeah, so I know I'm out there, and if there's clarification that's needed, ask me questions. I'm happy to clarify, and my mom is on vacation right now, a well-deserved vacation. And next week we will hopefully be doing another video. She's going to be pissed that I mentioned the Ned Stark Greenseer thing, but she will go into great detail about the impact of that and the justifications for it. So look forward to that. And let me make sure I got everything on here. Okay, last tiny little bit. In the same sense that we're doing afterlives and collective consciousnesses, I've mentioned this in a previous video, I mentioned it in the final battle video. All of these afterlives are, in one way or another, good. Sort of. At least if you're a white, your consciousness is dead. So there's benefits to all of these, but none of them mimic hell. And I think without a doubt we're going to find out that the Night King's mind is hell itself, that he can bring a soul in there and torture it forever. He can skin change your mind, pull it into his own, and torture it and live and feed off of your terror and pain. And that's exactly how Varamir describes being kicked out of his eagle at the battle at the wall, the battle between Mance Rayder and the wall, and then Stannis. Okay, thank you so much for watching. You know we've got more planned. So look forward to more videos, and I know I will. Thank y'all so much for watching, and feel free to ask questions and stuff. I'm going to put some links in the video description, including an interview with the guy who plays both White Walkers. The two main White Walkers were played by this guy, including the one who offers the baby up in episode 4 of season 4. But apparently he does not play the Night's King, and I bet you it's Burn Gorman playing the Night's King. A different character from the Carl Clubfoot thing he was playing earlier, but I bet you he's the Night's King. He would be perfect for it. If you go look at the pictures of the Night's King and look at pictures of Burn Gorman, I'm pretty sure they're the same guy. All right. Thank y'all for watching. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And Charlie and Eli and Tony Teflon and Meister Payne and my mama, looking forward to next year. And there's going to be more before that, including y'all. All right. Thank y'all for watching.